Guys, and welcome back to Gardening Suburbia. My name is Amanda, and today I am making up a very generic tomato sauce and tomato paste. These are things that I can just kind of go ahead and mold to whatever meal that I'm making. But the end goal for these two projects is to make pre-starter Sloppy Joe mix, which I love Sloppy Joes. But I don't really love all the additive ingredients that are in the canned Sloppy Joes that we get from stores. So I found this recipe in my Ball cookbook, the canning and preserving Ball cookbook. Before I can even start making that recipe, I need to get my roasted tomato paste and my tomato sauce made up. I do already have, I think I have 9 cans of tomato sauce that I made from Garden Fresh tomatoes. Although my tomatoes did not do so well this year, so I don't have as much of my tomato sauce as I would like. So I went ahead and purchased a whole bunch of Roma tomatoes. These are actually Roma tomatoes from Jungle Gyms. Stopped by there today, and I picked up about 12 to 15 pounds of just Roma tomatoes that were actually in their reduced price section, just because they were either bruised or just a little softer or more towards the end of their life than the other produce that they sell. So these guys I actually got on sale, which I'm gonna go ahead and use them up today. So the fact that they have some bruises, I'll just cut away any of the super bad parts. But otherwise, they're perfect for canning, and they'll stay shelf stable for as long as I need them. So let's go ahead and start up our tomato paste. These are gonna be roasting in the oven for a couple hours. So for my tomato paste, I need to go ahead and get about 12 pounds of my Romas prepped. I need to get my oven preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, about 180 degrees Celsius, and these are going to sit in the oven for about an hour and a half, just so that they bake down and get that really dark red coloring. So first we need to get our tomatoes prepped and in the oven so that I can do some other projects while those are roasting. So I'm just going to go ahead and get my oven preheated to 350 while I'm getting my tomatoes prepped. I already have my water bath canner full of water. I'm not going to get this boiling just yet, just because it is going to be about an hour or so before I really need this. So I don't really want to waste the water through evaporation before then. But oven's preheated, and we're going to get started on those tomatoes. So I've got my little prepping tomato station here. I've got my scale on so I can measure out 12 pounds of tomatoes. I'm going ahead and slicing the tops off of these tomatoes. These guys I'm going to go ahead and dehydrate and then blend into a powder to get like a tomato powder that I can add to different dishes. I think that'll be a really useful way of using my scraps. And then I'm going ahead and just halving these tomatoes and then squeezing out any of the juice. And this juice I'm going to go ahead and actually add it to my tomato sauce just to give it a more rich flavor. And again, that way I'm not wasting any of the products, and everything's getting used. Especially with tomato paste, you want to make sure that you're removing a lot of the juice and seeds just so that you get a thicker product. Currently I have almost 4 pounds of tomatoes here, and I need 12, so I still got a ways to go. Okay, so I have about 10 pounds of my tomatoes that I've de-seeded and halved. I'm going to go ahead and pop these into some baking pans. I've kind of sprayed them with some olive oil, and then I'm just going to go ahead and sprinkle some sea salt on top of these tomatoes just to pull a little bit more of the moisture out. So I'm just going to go ahead and put these in the oven for about an hour and a half. For the first 40 minutes, stir them, check on them, make sure they're not burning, and then go from there. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to pack these in pretty tightly, just because I don't have a lot of oven space and I really don't have that many baking dishes. And I still need to get another 2 pounds of these de-seeded. So I'm gonna tightly pack them just so that I'm not wasting any space. Hopefully they will all fit in my oven. Okay, so our tomato paste is roasting in the oven. In about 5-10 minutes, I'm gonna go ahead and stir those so that they aren't burning. But while that is cooking, we're gonna go ahead and get started on our tomato sauce from the all-new Ball Book of Canning and Preserving. This calls for about 15 pounds of ripe plum tomatoes. I'm gonna go ahead and mix it up just because it's what I have. So I have some of these tomatoes. Don't know what they're called, don't know what variety. I got these at the grocery store. They were marketed as vine ripened tomatoes, which I just found out that companies can market tomatoes as vine ripened as long as they are sold with a portion of the vine. Doesn't necessarily that they were ripened on the plant itself, but they were ripened on a portion of the stem while in transit. So that's interesting. So this will have the robust flavor of a tomato that's picked in the middle of the day when it's hot and the plant hasn't been watered and it has all those wonderful sugars in the tomato. But it's still going to be a perfect item to be placed in my pantry for the middle of winter. So I have these guys, and then I also do have just the Roma tomatoes. Luckily, with all of the clearance tomatoes that I got from Jungle Gems, I didn't have to waste any of them. They were perfectly ripened for my sauce. I have a bowl of seeds and juices from the tomato paste batch. I'm going to go ahead and add this into my tomato sauce. And I'm going to let this cook down longer than what the book is calling for. So the book calls for having the seeds and the skins removed. I'm going to go ahead and blanch my tomatoes just because I do not have a food mill. That I'm just going to remove the skins that way, and then I'm just going to leave the seeds in there and I'm going to cook it down longer. It says to cook it down for about 45 minutes. I'm going to let this cook down for about an hour and a half just so it is a thicker consistency, much like it would be if I followed the recipe like this. But I really want that rich tomato flavor, so that's why I'm going to keep the seeds in there. So I just need to get started on cutting all of these tomatoes. I'm going to hatch the bottom of them, put an X on the bottom of the tomato, the opposite end of the stem, and I'm going to blanch them for about a few minutes until the skins start to peel, and then I'll put them in an ice cold bath. That way the skins peel pretty easily. So I am going to go ahead and take a weight of my tomatoes before I put them to blanch, just because I do want to know how many pounds of tomatoes I'm doing. I have about a rough estimate. I should have about 16.5 pounds of tomatoes that are going in this, so this is 1.5 pounds more than what the recipe calls for. And I just want to make sure I'm not too far out, just so that I'm giving the right consistency of ingredients for the rest of the recipe. So currently I'm just going to go ahead and hatch the bottom, putting a nice little X on all of these. And I may even actually core my tomatoes now, just so that it is even easier, but we will see. So I decided that I am going to go ahead and core my tomatoes. I have about 9 pounds so far, and I'm just going to go ahead and add these cores to this pot here. And this is going to be, again, turned into dehydrated tomatoes that I can go ahead and ground up into like a tomato powder that I can then add to various meals. Make Spanish rice with it. You can make add it to your spaghetti sauce if you want to, if you're feeling it like it's a little bland. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so I'd have to say that blanching tomatoes is probably my preferred method of getting the skins off. It seems to be a whole lot easier than when they're frozen. A few weeks ago I did salsa and my spaghetti sauce, and I did the frozen method. I do like that method solely for the fact that I can store my tomatoes up until the point that I have enough of them to do a big canning project. But it is really cold. Maybe next year when I, start collecting all my tomatoes, I'll do the freezing method and just make sure that I put my tomatoes out way sooner than I did this year. But for fresh tomatoes, if I have a big harvest, I definitely like the blanching method just because it's so much easier, and definitely removing the cores before doing so. They literally slip off. So these are tomatoes that are cooled in some just cool water, no ice, and the skins just come right off. Like, so easy. And honestly, these are a lot cooler than the previous time I had blanched tomatoes to take the skins off, so it's not even burning my fingers. Just awesome. So right now for my tomato sauce, I'm just going ahead and adding these skinless cored tomatoes to a big stock pot. And then I'll just go ahead and cook that down longer than if I had removed the seeds. Okay, so I have all my tomatoes for my tomato sauce in my pot back here boiling. I'm gonna go ahead and start dehydrating all of these tomato peels and cores. It's gonna take a long time. I'm probably gonna have to store more than half of this in my fridge until I can put another batch in. My dehydrator that I'm using is not a large scale dehydrator. It is the Ninja Air Foodie XL grill thing, but it has a dehydration setting. I've never done tomato peels in the dehydrator, so I'm assuming it won't take a ton of time just because these are super thin. They do have a lot of moisture though, so we'll see. I think that the setting that I use is at 135 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's probably going to be about 6 hours or so. So we'll check back in on these at a later time in another video. So while the tomatoes are boiling for the tomato sauce and we have our tomatoes for our tomato paste in the oven, I'm going to go ahead and start making our seasoning blend that I'm going to be adding to this sauce. I'm going to actually do one that's from the book. So this Italian seasoning has oregano, basil, garlic powder, thyme, and crushed red pepper. So I'm just going to go ahead and deviate from this recipe just a hair. So I do have some oregano and basil and thyme all out in the garden. So I'm going to go ahead, I have just regular oregano and I have hot and spicy oregano, and I have two types of basil. I have the regular Genovese basil, as well as this Thai basil, which has this really pretty purple variegation. I probably will stick to just the original Genovese basil. I'm just going to use the regular dried garlic powder, and I'm going to go ahead and do a mixture of the standard oregano and the hot and spicy oregano. And I think I'm actually going to go ahead and add in some of my barbecue rosemary. It is really good. So this has that smoky flavor that you find in barbecue sauce, but it also has that really distinctive rosemary flavor. So I'm going to go ahead and add that into my mixture as well, just because I think it'll be a nice little hint. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and mix this up real fast. Smells good. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and add this to the sauce, and then we'll be ready to puree our tomato paste. Right now I have this on a low simmer. I am trying to cool it down just a little bit so that I can process it in my processor. But I need to get my tomato paste in the oven again because it needs another 2.5 to 3.5 hours to cook down to the right consistency, and that smells really good. Cook down to the right consistency and color. Because tomato paste, you want it to be a dark, deep red. Okay, so for my tomatoes, I'm just going to go ahead and throw them in my food processor in batches and then just re-pan them. Don't mind my dog, he really does not like this thing. It's too loud of a noise for him. So I'm just going to repan these with a thin layer. It would be easier just to put it all in one, but it's going to make it cook a lot faster if it's in a thin layer. So I'm going to pop these back in the oven so I have more space. Alright, so made a mistake. Before I pop these back in the oven, I need to put it into a big bowl and add in my citric acid or the lemon juice. I'm going to do lemon juice because it is what I have. And I need to add a 1/4 cup of lemon juice to the entire batch. So I'm just going to go ahead and use this stock pot. I need to pull those guys back out of the oven. Okay, so I use an organic lemon juice, just a Santa Cruz organic lemon juice. It's pure lemon juice, that's all it is. And I need a 1/4 cup. Yes. Go ahead and measure this out. Add it into my mixture and then give it a good stir, and then I'll go ahead and distribute the sauce into these and place them back in the oven. So I'm just going to go ahead and pop these back in my oven. The recipe does say to check on them every 20 to 30 minutes to make sure that they're not burning for at least the first 40 to 50 minutes. And then they should just be in the oven for about an hour, or 2.5 hours to 3.5 hours, depending on how deep red they are, will be determined by what kind of tomatoes you used. So keep you updated. So for my tomato sauce, I'm just going to go ahead and ladle it into here. And then once I'm done processing this, I'm going to go ahead and throw it in this other stock pot, just so that I'm processing everything the same. I need the blade. this smells so good. Okay, so I went ahead and I tasted my tomato sauce that is now simmering on the stovetop, and it just needs a little bit more salt. So I'm going to add a tablespoon of the sea salt, and then I'm going to taste it again. Alright, I'm going to add 1 more tablespoon of salt, and then I think it's going to be perfect. Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, so now I need to add my lemon juice. This recipe calls for a 1/3 cup of lemon juice. So adding in the lemon juice or citric acid, just really make sure that there's enough acid in your tomato product that it won't spoil while it's being stored in your shelves. So I'm going to let this simmer for about 5 more minutes, and then we'll go ahead and get the water bath canner set up and get our jars sterilized. I'm going to need 6 pints. I'm going to sterilize about 7 to 8 just in case, and we'll go from there. Okay, so my tomato sauce has been simmering on the stove for about 45 minutes with the lemon juice and the salt. I'm going to go ahead and pack it into these jars. I went ahead and threw them into my water bath canner to sterilize them. I need to pack these jars with a 1/2 inch of headspace. So that is just about to this bottom rim right here on all the jars. I'm just going to go ahead and start ladling this into my sauce, or my sauce into the jars. So the recipe says that I'll have about 6 pints of sauce. We'll see if that is true. Already making a mess. I think we're definitely going to have more than 7. There's 6. So while those are getting sterilized, I'm going to go ahead and wipe off the rims. You really want to make sure that you get a nice, good, clean rim. That way you get a good seal. So it's really important to make sure you do this. I have heard that people use a small dab of vinegar on whatever towel or paper towel that they're using to wipe off their rims, just to go ahead and give an extra measure of safety. I'm just using a wet rag, well, damp rag. And since I can only fit 7 jars in my, or 7 pints in my water bath canner here, I'm going to go ahead and throw these in after I take those jars out. So I'm going to go ahead and apply my lids and bands at a fingertip tightness, making sure that they are centered is good. And these are going to go in for 35 minutes at my altitude. I don't have to actually add time onto my processing, but do make sure that you look up your altitude at whatever location you're canning at, and there is a ball altitude guideline that tells you how much time to add to your processing for water bath canning and for pressure canning, and just add accordingly. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and pop my jars in one at a time. You want to make sure that they are fully submerged. This ensures that you're getting the right kind of process for them. So there is one thing that I've learned that I really like to add into my water bath canner, and that is vinegar. It really helps to make sure that the jars come out really nice and clean and they don't have a film on them from the lime or calcium. And then It also keeps your canning stock pot really nice and clean. It doesn't leave a nice film on that either. So these are going to get processed for 35 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and set a timer so I do not forget. And then I'm going to pop the lid on because it is boiling. And I'm going to go ahead and finish filling up my jars, and then we'll see how many I get. There's already 7 pints in here, and that's one more already than the recipe called for. So our tomato paste is all finished cooking. I added it all into one jar or pan so that it wasn't burning, because it did burn a little bit. It's still really hot. I left it in the oven with the oven off so that it could finish up canning my tomato sauce, which is all finished now. So I need to go ahead and jar this up. I am currently sterilizing my jars, but they should be finished. I'm not really sure how much this is going to make, just because I think I did use a little bit more tomatoes than the recipe calls for. This said it was going to be about 4-ounce jars, or 125 milliliter jars, which would be these little guys here. But I do have 2 of these half pints. So I'm going to go ahead and fill up my half pints first, just because I don't want them to have, or I want them to have the correct headspace, which is about 1/4 inch of headspace. So I'm going to use my spatula. And I'm going to go ahead and try to pack this really well into the jar, just because I don't want there to be any air bubbles, because that'll mess up the processing. This is my first time doing tomato paste. It tastes really, really good. So it's probably something I would definitely think about doing again. With all of these jars, I'm packing them tightly, making sure to remove any of the bubbles, and then making sure at the end to leave at least 1/4 inch of a headspace for the proper processing time with this tomato paste. Okay, so I was able to get 2 of these half pints, this 4-ounce jar, and then I believe, really don't know what size this jar is. But it's a little bigger than the half pint, and it's not quite a pint. So these are great. I'm going to go ahead and wipe off the rims, and this little extra is just going to go into my fridge, and I'll just use this as I need it. Okay, so this is actually going to be an experiment too, because I have some Kerr lids. I've never actually used these before, so 2 of these will be ball and 2 of these will be the Kerr. I'll go ahead and do these half pints with the ball. Again, just center them on and then fingertip tight. Alright, and then we'll go ahead and drop these in the water bath canner, and these will process for 40 minutes, and make sure you adjust for your altitude again. So those jars will process for 40 minutes. I'll go ahead and turn off the heat, take off the lid, and let them sit in the water for 5 minutes. This is like the typical thing that you would do when water bath canning with all recipes. You allow them to sit, acclimate to that temperature, and then when you take them out, they have more or less of a temperature difference to go to, making it so that they're less likely to break or whatnot. So I hope you guys will join me for the next video, which will be us taking these 2 recipes and combining them to then make our Sloppy Joe starter mix. Before then, I wanted to say a final thank you to my sister. Found a Etsy shop that's actually Langley Metalworks, and this is the company that made this beautiful sign for me. So my sister had this sign made through this company, and it is my Welcome to Gardening Suburbia sign. It's made out of metal, it's beautiful, and I just want to say thank you, Alicia. I love it. It's gorgeous. I just need to find a nice place for this to go outside. I'm thinking about on the outside of my wooden pepper bed. Let me know down in the comments where you guys think I should hang this. It definitely will be coming with me when and if me and my boyfriend ever move, but it's just one step closer. So thank you guys for joining me, and I'll see you next time.